Thanks for tuning in to Grace Church Kidlington Online. My name's Phil Butcher, I'm the pastor. I wonder how you coped with the loss of freedoms in the lockdown that we experienced on and off over the last 18 months. I know for some people it was a chance to do something new, like knitting. Tom Daly inspired lots of people to take up a hobby like knitting, or perhaps you were one of the many households in our country that bought a lockdown puppy. But the restrictions we were placed under hit many of us in a different way. It really affected our sense of well-being. Losing the freedoms that we normally enjoy, we found that really hard. For most of us, it was the first time in our lives where choice has been taken away from us. We couldn't just choose to go out to the shops, or choose to go out to the cinema, or choose a friend to meet up with and go out for a meal with. It was a strange time, wasn't it? And for many of us, each day felt a bit like Groundhog Day, the same thing over and over again. So no wonder when the government was looking at reopening society again, they latched upon this phrase, Freedom Day, the day when all the restrictions would be lifted and we could get on with our lives again. Now, we're several months down the road from Freedom Day, and I can't even remember what day it was, so perhaps it wasn't such a big deal that we thought it would be. And for many of us, life feels fairly normal again. And yet, is this return to normal what freedom is really about? Are we free again? Because I think Freedom Day language tapped into something that lies at the heart of our aspirations as a society. We all desire to be free to live our life the way we want to live it. But I wonder, is this true freedom? Our society seems to equate freedom with the ability to choose. Not just choosing where we shop or how we spend our time, but more essentially choosing who we are, choosing our identity. It seems to be that freedom equals getting rid of everything or anything that stops you being you. So, for example, just before the first lockdown, Harry Styles, who used to sing with the group One Direction, he was on a world tour, and he started every single one of his concerts, wherever city he was in, by saying this. He said, "You can be whoever you want to be in this room tonight. Free to be exactly who you want to be." Or even just take government statements coming out of the conference season, where I heard a politician say, we want everyone to be free to reach their potential in life, which is actually a great aspiration. But from a Christian viewpoint, I wonder if this understanding of freedom is slightly problematic. Let me give you two ways I think it's a bit problematic. Here's the first one. What if my freedom might actually hinder someone else's freedom? I'm going to give you an extreme example. Imagine I was to say to my wife this evening, I'm feeling trapped in this relationship. I want to be free to find love elsewhere. I'm leaving. My choosing what I think will make me free would actually devastate someone else's life. And what if, for her to be free, she wants to be married to me? Does she not get a choice to be free? In fact, on one level, our society recognises that total freedom from all constraints would actually equal anarchy. That's why we have laws. But who decides whose freedom trumps another's? Throughout history, the answer to that will have changed, and it will change again in the future. If this is our only understanding of what freedom is, it's a bit problematic. My freedom might actually stop someone else being free. And here's a second problem, I think. Is my freedom to choose actually doing me good? Now, I know most of us want to be the best version of ourselves we can be. We want to be loving and kind and generous and useful. And yet, why is it we find that so hard to do? We think if we have freedom, we'll choose what's best. We'll make the best decisions. But in my experience, so often we don't. I'll give you a trivial example. I have the freedom to eat whatever I want. When I'm the only one at home, no one else is looking, What do I choose? I've got a bowl of fruit on the table, really good for me, but I've also got a bar of chocolate. And after a long day when I'm tired, what do I choose? The chocolate. Or more seriously, the millions of people in our society who struggle with addictions, be they addictions to betting or pornography or alcohol, they know that the freedom to choose has actually ended up with them being enslaved by the very thing they chose to do. Their freedom has actually ended up enslaving them. And we don't need to be addicts to know that this is often our experience. The first century Christian leader, Paul, puts it this way in a book in the Bible called Romans. He said this, perhaps you can relate to this experience. I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Perhaps we're not as free as we think we are. And this is where Jesus can bring us some good news. But actually, to get us to the good news, he starts off by showing us that what we think is freedom is actually slavery. I want to read you some words of Jesus recorded for us by his eyewitness John. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." They answered him, "We're Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free?" Jesus replied, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free," talking about himself, "you will be free indeed." Jesus' hearers are offended by his telling them that they're actually not free people but slaves. And they push back against him by saying, well, we've never been slaves of anyone, which is a bit narrow-sighted because at that very moment their country had been occupied by the Romans. And in the past they've been slaves in Egypt and they've been slaves in Babylon. But Jesus isn't talking about slavery to an occupying power, a foreign nation. He's pointing them to something bigger and more serious. A slavery that actually, he says, everyone needs setting free from. Did you see his words, hear his words when he said, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin." What is sin? It's not a word we use very often these days, is it? But sin is living as if we were God. Deciding for ourselves what is right and wrong. Living for ourselves. A simple way of getting your head around what sin means is a little acronym that I use when I explain it to children often. S means shove off God. I'm in charge. N, no thank you, Jesus. So instead of living in right relationship with our Creator, which actually leads to our own flourishing and creates communities that thrive, we tell God to get lost. We want to choose our own way, which actually offends him, often hurts others, and always damages ourselves. And we think this is the way to freedom. Not being accountable to anyone, living exactly the way that I choose to live, not having to follow anyone else's instructions. And yet we end up enslaved by what we desire and what we choose. You see, we all worship something and we become like what we worship. So if you're worshipping comfort and ease, you increasingly make decisions in your life where your comfort and ease trumps everyone else's needs around you. Or if you live for what you own and the experiences that money can buy, you end up worshipping money. It enslaves you because you never ever get to the point of having enough. Rich people have said that. They always wanted that little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Worst of all, our sin leads to death, to eternal separation from the God who gives us life. In the book of the Bible called Romans, we read this: "For the wages of sin is death." What we choose to live for will either give us life or it will lead to death. What our society says is freedom actually enslaves us. It traps us now. We end up unable to control ourselves and our appetites. It cuts us off from God and ultimately leads to eternal death. But thankfully, Jesus offers us freedom, true freedom. Let me read to you what he said, what we mentioned earlier on. Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Jesus taught about our sin and our need for a rescue from our enslavement to it. Knowing this truth is the starting point to true freedom. On another occasion, Jesus said this. He said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Do you see how Jesus says he is the truth? He doesn't just speak the truth, but he is truth in person. So to know the truth is to know him, and knowing him will set us free. Knowing the truth that sets us free from sin means coming to know Jesus personally through faith in him. And how can Jesus give us true freedom? Well, when he started his public preaching and healings, he quoted from a prophecy that had been written hundreds of years before his time. It says this, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free." And when he quoted that, he then said, "And today this has been fulfilled in your hearing." He was saying that he had come to fulfill that prophecy. For those enslaved to sin, that's all of us. For those who are oppressed by our alienation from our Creator God, he came to offer us freedom. And ultimately, he can offer us that freedom because he alone has dealt with the penalty and the punishment of our sin by offering himself in our place, giving up his life on the cross for us. You see, his love for us is so great, his desire for us to know him and enter true freedom is so strong that he gave up his life. And on the third day, he rose again, showing us the life to come for those who trust in him. So he says, if the Son sets you free, talking about himself, you will be free indeed. To enter this relationship with Jesus in which he sets us free from the guilt of sin, sets us free from our fear of death, sets us free from the enslavement to our own sinful thoughts and practices, we first need to admit that we are slaves to sin, and that we need setting free. And that means coming to him humbly in our need, trusting that he is the way, the truth, and the life, turning from a life lived with yourself as God. It means becoming one of his disciples. That simply means a follower of him or a learner. And he promises to give all his disciples his very Spirit. His Spirit empowers us to not live for ourselves. It strengthens us to do what is good and right and leads to our flourishing. Before we were slaves to sin, but when we follow Jesus, we are free to live a new life. A life no longer enslaved to our past, our flaws, our selfish decisions. Jesus says, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Now, if this is all new to you, what can you do next? Here's a couple of ideas. Get in touch with us. Love to hear from you. You can email me through our website, which is on the screen now, or direct to my email address. Or read the evidence for yourself. Get a Bible or look online. There's free Bibles online. Maybe start off in a book called Mark, which is Mark's account of Jesus' life and death and resurrection. Or maybe consider coming on a course we run as a church called Christianity Explored. It's a course that's run all around the world. We're just over a few sessions. You get to look at the evidence yourself, ask any questions, have any reaction you want, but at least engage with who Jesus is and his words and why he said he came. And also you can join us on Sundays. We meet every week at 4 o'clock on a Sunday at Gosford Hill School in Kidlington. You see, Jesus says he came and died and rose again to set us free. It's as if we are prisoners in a cell and he's come and unlocked the door. Are we going to stay in there? Or are we going to respond to him and come out into freedom? Or to go back to our original analogy of thinking about our lockdown confinement, it's as if Jesus has come into our lockdown confinement and said to us, look, it's free. You're free to come outside again. Come outside with me. Will we stay inside? Or will we come out and discover in him true freedom? You see, the freedom that Jesus offers us is something far greater than Boris's Freedom Day could ever achieve. Far superior to just return to normal life. His freedom leads to real life now and forever. Thanks for listening.